Hello and welcome to What the F Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis, let's get to it. It's Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. Welcome to day 413. Joe Biden banned all imports of oil and natural gas from Russia, punishing Russia for its vicious war of choice in Ukraine. Quote, "The United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy," Biden said. "We will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war," end quote. Biden, however, did warn that the decision would mean higher prices for energy and at the gas pump, saying that defending freedom is going to cost. It's going to cost us as well in the United States. 79% of Americans, meanwhile, say they favored a ban on Russian oil imports even if it increased energy prices in the U.S., while 13% said they opposed it. The move was matched in part by the United Kingdom, which announced that it will phase out the import of Russian oil and oil products by the end of 2022. The European Union also took steps to scale back imports of Russian energy by approximately two-thirds this year. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the House plans to vote on legislation today to ban U.S. imports of Russian fossil fuels, calling it an urgent imperative, quote, "both morally and for our security interests," end quote. In addition to banning Russian oil, the bill would empower Biden to impose tariffs on other Russian products, as well as take steps to suspend Russia from the WTO and reauthorize and strengthen the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, which allows the U.S. to impose sanctions on countries in response to human rights abuses. Meanwhile, Poland offered to transfer all of its Russian-made MiG-29 fighter jets immediately and free of charge to a U.S. airbase in Germany. Russia has warned that delivering the jets to Ukraine would be seen as a provocation. Over the weekend, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. would give a green light if Poland or another NATO member sent jets to Ukraine, and that the U.S. could backfill those jets with F-16s, though it's unclear where the U.S. would pull the jets from in order to send them to Poland. Also, by giving the planes to the U.S. rather than directly to the Ukrainians, the Polish government sidesteps the logistical challenge of transferring the jets themselves. Poland has 28 of the Soviet-era MiG-29 jets. CIA Director William Burns, meanwhile, says Putin is angry and frustrated with how his invasion of Ukraine is going and will likely double down with no regard to civilian casualties. Speaking before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Burns said that Putin doesn't appear to have a sustainable political endgame in the face of, quote, "what is going to continue to be fierce resistance from Ukrainians," end quote. The likely result, Burns continued, is an ugly next few weeks of fighting. Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines added that Putin is unlikely to be deterred and instead may escalate, essentially doubling down to achieve Ukrainian disarmament and neutrality, to prevent it from further integrating with the U.S. and NATO if it doesn't reach some diplomatic negotiation. The Russian Foreign Ministry, on the other hand, reportedly suggested that Russia wants to go back to peaceful coexistence with the U.S. like during the Cold War. Moving on, the United States Senate unanimously approved a bill that makes lynching a federal hate crime in the United States, punishable by up to 30 years in prison. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act was approved by the House last month and now heads to Biden's desk for a signature. It took more than 100 years and 200 failed attempts to outlaw lynching since the first anti-lynching legislation was introduced in 1900 by Representative George Henry White. In D.C., the first January 6 defendant to take his case to trial was found guilty on all 5 counts that he faced related to his role in the attack on the Capitol. A jury found Guy Wesley Reffitt, a Texas 3%er, guilty of leading a pro-Trump mob against the police at the Capitol, as well as obstructing Congress's duty to certify the 2020 election, carrying a firearm during the attack, and threatening his teenage son and daughter to keep them from turning him into the FBI. Reffitt faces a maximum of 20 years in prison from the obstruction count alone and is scheduled to be sentenced on June 8th. On Christmas Eve, Reffitt's son, Jackson, submitted an online tip to the FBI warning that his father was planning to do, quote, "some serious damage," end quote. No one responded to the tip until after the insurrection. Meanwhile, a federal grand jury indicted the longtime leader of the white nationalist group the Proud Boys with conspiracy to obstruct Congress related to the insurrection, making him the second leader of a far-right group to face charges in the past several months. The indictment alleges that Enrique Tarrio, quote, "led the advance planning and remained in contact with other members of the Proud Boys during their breach," end quote, including taking credit for what had happened on social media and participating in a private Telegram group chat during and after the attack. In January, prosecutors charged the leader of the Oath Keepers militia, Stuart Rhodes, with seditious conspiracy for his months-long effort to violently disrupt the transfer of power. And finally, Florida's GOP-controlled legislature passed a controversial bill that forbids lessons on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through third grade. The legislation, which Democrats and LGBTQ activists have dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill, now heads to Governor Ron DeSantis' desk, who has signaled that he supports the measure. The bill bans, quote, classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity, end quote, in kindergarten or third grade, or, quote, in a manner that is not age-appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students, end quote. Parents would be able to sue school districts over supposed violations if the bill goes through and becomes law. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditas.